Morning and welcome to the reconvened session of the fourth meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure. We are reconvening, of course, at the J. Hamilton Maurice Room. I wish to advise that all cell phones should be either placed on silent or deactivated. Welcome to members of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Infrastructure. Welcome to the members of the public and particularly our witnesses here this morning, the Merikins Incorporated. This is, of course, our first public meeting pursuant to our inquiry into land tenure issues. The purpose, of course, of this meeting is to determine the land tenure issues affecting Trinidad and Tobago, and more particularly in the instant case, to examine strategies to deal with the major challenges affecting the Merikins society. I would now like to inform you that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament Channel 11. It's also available on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Of course, the viewing and listening audience can send comments via email at parl101@ttparliament.org or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament or on Twitter at ttparliament. I take this opportunity to again welcome members of the Merikins Incorporation to our sitting, and I would now, of course, invite you to introduce yourselves to the committee.
My name is Joseph Burton. I am Vice President of the Merikins Incorporated.
My name is Lisa Atwater, Public Relations Officer, Merikins Incorporated.
Hilary Bobcom, Secretary.
Anson Griffith, one of the trustees.
Marva Cooper, trustee.
I, of course, am Stephen Crease, Independent Senator and Chairman of this committee. I will now invite members of the committee, starting on my right, to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Rushton Parry. I'm the Vice Chairman of the committee. I'm also the Member of Parliament for Mayaro.
Senator Franklin Khan, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, committee member. No, and former Member of Parliament for Moruga.
Dr. Level Francis, Minister in the Ministry of Education, Member of Parliament from Moruga Tableland.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel Solomon, Senator Daniel Solomon.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Glenda Jennings-Smith, and I am the Member of Parliament for Toko Sangre Grande, as well as I am also the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of National Security.
Okay. Mr. Joseph Burton, Vice President. I would now invite you to make a presentation to the committee.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stephen Crease, members of the head table, distinguished members of the head table, members of the Joint Select Committee, and other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Vice President of Merikins Inc. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to be invited here to highlight an issue that's dear to us. We are in existence now for the past 12 years. And today we sit here with a joy in our hearts because Saturday, the 9th of April, would be our 12th anniversary. And we are proud of that. We are deeply committed to American heritage. Our group focuses on the assistance of youths with respect to SEA scholarships and also providing for the elderly with hampers. I now take the opportunity to hand over to Ms. Atwater, who will give you a brief history of our group. Thank you.
Good morning to the chairman and other members of the Joint Select Committee of Land and Physical Infrastructure. The 20th August 2016 would mark the bicentennial anniversary of the arrival of Merikins, African Americans, in this country. This group of people has a peculiar history. Our American ancestors were ex-slaves who originated from Georgia, Maryland, and Virginia area, close to the Atlantic seaboard of the United States of America. These ex-slaves had obtained their freedom, and it is said that they were part of the Underground Railroad system, which operated to help free other slaves. During the War of 1812, the British tried to regain control of the newly independent American colonies. She recruited ex-slaves in batches or battalions of 6 companies as part of her war effort. They became known as the Corps of Colonial Marines. They were known for their bravery, discipline, expertise in guerrilla warfare, and their knowledge of local American conditions. The American soldiers feared the Americans more than their European counterparts. However, the British lost the war, and it was impossible for Americans to remain on American soil. You must note that slavery was alive and vibrant in the American South. Giving ammunition to a black man, even during wartime, was unheard of and unacceptable. The British had to find somewhere to house the members of the Corps of Colonial Marines. Trinidad at that time was a newly acquired British territory. In fact, we had been under British rule for less than 20 years. The then governor, Ralph Woodford, was anxious to see the more remote parts of the island developed through settlement. South Trinidad had vast amounts of virgin territory, and the governor made the British colonial administration aware of this reality. The Corps of Colonial Marines and their families were offered relocation to Trinidad. They were further offered 16 acres of land per head of each household as payment for services rendered in war. This 16 acres of land, bloodland as it is sometimes referred to, was given to themselves and their heirs in perpetuity. The Merikins arrived in Trinidad on August 20th, 1816, in 6 companies, in the same manner in which they were recruited, and settled along the Murga Road and the outskirts of Princestown. First company was settled in Hindustan. The second company settled in Pitikafi. This holding included 16 acres owned by Ma Matilda, a fellow Merikin. She allowed Warahun Indians from Venezuela who landed in Grand Chimay and were journeying to Mission, now called Princestown, to pass through her land, thus reducing the distance. Third company was settled in Indian Walk area. Fourth company was settled in Handbagging, Williamsville, and the New Grand areas. Fifth and sixth companies retain their original names. Pleased to be masters of their own destiny, these ex-slaves, ex-soldiers of the Corps of Colonial Marines settled down to life in Trinidad during the era of slavery. They brought their skills, their legacy of hard work, and the Baptist religion to these parts, and so their communities revolved around their churches. This group showed resilience and ingenuity despite being placed in a foreign, inhospitable environment. They were pioneers in many respects. These Afro-American settlers and their descendants became known as Merikins, the shortened form of I'm American. Their history is our heritage. The group Merikin Inc. has been in existence for 12 years. During that time, our recurring theme has been towards a richer heritage, keeping in mind that heritage is that which may be inherited, be it circumstances or benefits, and it becomes more important when it is worthy of preservation. American history, American ideals, American culture, and American land are all worthy of preservation. As we sit here today, we are cognizant of the fact that our society is sometimes guilty of not valuing our local history enough. We are guilty of not putting enough effort into preserving what we have, and so we let it go to waste. We cannot continue this way. As such, Merikin Inc. wants to be part of the process that changes this mindset. We recognize our history, we value our heritage, and we aim to preserve this heritage. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President of Merikin Inc., are there any particular aspects of your history that you would like to bring to our attention in terms of the land tenure problems that you have been experiencing?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to introduce Mr. Anthony Griffith to highlight our plight in this.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. There are a number of challenges in the American area. The first one we need to identify is that we as an organization representing Merikin Inc., popularly called Merikin, came into existence on April 9, 2004. The American community, and especially our youths, are unaware of our legacy and are unaware of land title and their history, and thus it limits their rights in becoming true landowners. Merikin Inc., together with others, have been popularizing the history for the last 12 years, and we want to emphasize that the lack of information and misinformation has hindered social and economic mobility in the American community. Land ownership is not synonymous with poverty. And in our community, we are saying that our foreparents were given 16 acres of land in the initial onset. And added to that, when they were able to produce more, the state granted them excesses in order for them to produce. Today, a lot of our people are disenfranchised because of our process that I'll go on to the second point. Our observation and our rudimentary research and analysis have pointed to substantial fraudulent acquisition of American land. And it is even more important that earlier on this year, the Law Association was saying that a lot of fake lawyers were causing lands to be transferred illegally and fraudulently. And this is one of the areas that is critical in the American area. We have observed that whole new communities are being developed in our community. Squatting is the order of the day. So you have squatting in PT Cafe, Indian Walk, Fifth Company, Hard Bargain, New Grant. The original owners of some of those properties are actually non-existent. We are also saying that in some cases, members of the American community are being forced to pay for land that is theirs. So you have people who claiming these land and causing members of our own community to pay them for what is rightfully there. And the issue also is the utility companies in Trinidad and Tobago. As an American and as a landowner, it's really difficult for you to get TNTEC, WASA, and TSCT to give you a natural supply of their amenities. However, in the squatting communities, we don't know what is taking place, but those communities are filled with lights, water, internet, and all the amenities, and persons who have legitimate rights do not have those amenities. We are also saying that there needs to be a definite demarcation of what is state land and American land, because our history also shows us that areas such as Fairfield supposed to be American land. And even if we go back to John Wise, in his research, he said that Manahambri was also given to the American. In addition to that, when the Americans were moved from Hard Bargain to New Grant, they were granted 16 acres of land in Hard Bargain. When they were removed to New Grant, there is no documentary evidence to claim that those lands were revoked. And if those lands were not revoked, what we are saying, that the persons who were Americans in Hard Bargain, they are entitled now today for 32 acres, 16 in Hard Bargain and 16 in New Grant. We are also saying, as it respects to American land, because there has been a lack of foresight, a lack of planning, and a lack of diligent oversight in the communities, we are also saying that the land has become landlocked. So we have a lot of properties that actually we are unable to get it. There are huge areas of backland where agriculture could be developed and things like that, but we are unable to get access to those land. And we could also say that in times like now, it have certain groups that have come into the area and used strong-arm tactics and taken 30 and 40 acres of land. And nobody in the community seems to be able to stand up to these groups. We are also saying that in our research, we have seen that 15 acres, 3 rods and 3 perches was given to the American when they arrived in the Indian Walk area. That was specifically for recreational use. It's 200 years later. And the only thing was done to that land, under the last administration, the land was surveyed. But 200 years later, that land is filled of teak trees, the land is unoccupied, and the legacy that they wanted for us, we have not realized that. And we are saying that someone might ask why we are here today. It cannot be that 200 years is 200 years too long. If we lose our legacy, our children and grandchildren, and even our present-day people will lose their land, they will lose their property, and they will lose their heritage. And I don't think that the people who fought in America in a war that was not theirs and came to Trinidad and Tobago and was given 16 acres of land, I don't think that they would be satisfied that we would just stand and give away what is rightfully ours. We are saying that the challenges may be infrastructural, the challenges may be political, but we are saying that as American and as true landowners, because we were here not as slaves, we were here as free men. We came here as free men, and we intend to fight what is rightfully ours. So we are just saying that these are some of the challenges we are facing, and we would like the appropriate steps and measures to be put in place in order to deal effectively and critically with our issues. Thank you.
Thank you, but could you indicate, for the benefit of the committee, what legal steps have been taken thus far, or what interactions with any state agencies you all have engaged in?
Under the last administration, we had the Minister of Gender and Youth Affairs, that is Mr. Clifton Dikoto. He was our MP, and he was really trying rigorously to assist us in that area. But in the light of that, it wouldn't just take simple measures. It needs resources, because in order for us to identify those lands need to be surveyed. Yeah, and to survey, if we did deal with the initial count, it will amass to 6,608 acres of land initially. And we are not talking about the expanse that was given after that. So it will take a lot of resources, and I don't think the members of our group don't have that resources to pay for that type of scope of work.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the committee, are there any?
Other than the efforts with the Honorable Clifton Decoto, have you made any legal claims, legitimate claims with attorneys or howsoever in the private sector at all? Or?
Some of the persons in the community could show you their deeds of comfort. But what was critical, some members of the American families would have actually told their children that they were inheritors of this land. Some family, it seemed like they didn't. So it could be the state that because of lack of knowledge, you're not even aware that you have this possession and you could fight for it. So one of our trusts is actually to get people aware in the community and what is their right. Because like right now, it have a person who have come into the community, claim over 32 acres of land and selling that land for $35,000 a plot. Yeah. And if we check the cadastral map from 1925 and before that, we're not seeing their name on that one. Prior to that, after that period, we seen that person's name. So it's, if the lands were given minus property, meaning that it couldn't be sold, we are asking the question, how they got how did they get access to that and cause even government agency to put their name on that register?
Yeah. Let me ask a couple of questions. The original Merikins came on each head of household. You say got 16 acres of land. Obviously, that, from my knowledge of land law, that has to be a crown grant. Am I right? Are there any way in the American community that you have residing with some family, the original crown grant?
Mr. Khan, in my position at this moment, I have here a grant from my grandfather. What it says, Royal Grant for Crown Lands Sold, is what I've got. Victoria, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and of the colonies of the pendencies thereof, Queen, Defender of the Faith. It's got the original stamp, and it reads, "Know ye that we duly do by these present us our heirs and successors in consideration of the sum of $28.80 to us paid grant unto Henry Burton, his heirs, and assigned all that parcel of a lot of land situate in Savannah Grande. And some of the writing here that I'm reading is sort of obliterated. And in this, what's that? That's could barely make it. I think it's Savannah Grande. That's okay, Savannah Grande. 6 acres.
Okay, we take your point, Mr. Burton, that yes, you members of your committee do have original documentation. Mr. Khan, you want to continue?
I would also like to point out that I have in my possession land and building tax receipt paid by Mr. Bobcom way back in 1857, the original document. So we've been doing our research and we have instances of where we have original documents available.
Now, you have to realize that this is a very complicated legal matter. It is also, in my personal opinion, it is a heritage matter also that is steeply rooted in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And we as legislators, I think, have to take cognizance of that. But having said that, there are two ways to approach this, in my view. One, for those families that have the original grant, it means they have what they call a root title. And then from that root title, land could be conveyed to their generations and their siblings and what have you. But obviously, you're claiming up to 7,000 acres of original grants to the American. 90% of that you don't have a head title, meaning a congrat specific to a family. So and then who are the families? Who are the original 300 or 400 people who each got 16 acres? And then who now is American? Because there have been so much intermarriage and what have you. Because my father from 6 companies, so I probably am American too. So the thing about it is that there are two ways to look at it. For those of you who have the original congruent within your family structure, there may be a way to deal with that. Because in doing land research, any lawyer who wrote it sold has to go to a root title and then search from there, come back down. So obviously, the people who coming in to claim 30 and 40 acres, there's some flawed legal transactions inside there, but that's a different issue. But the other way to look at it is possibly the state contemplating by legislation deeming some lands to American heritage.
Mr. Khan, that is our number 1 recommendation.
Yeah, because you cannot go to the individual families
we
now.
Acknowledge
And I mean, sorry to say it, but it comes almost like the American Indian reservations. And some concept like that and say this is heritage land. And I think the Carib community in Arima has a semblance of that also. But in your case, it is more specific. So I think we could take a two-pronged approach to that. I will say no more at this point in time.
I would like to point out the fact that if you look at a cadastral plan for barring that a lot of the original ones would have been destroyed in the Red House fire. If you look coming down the years, the names of the original settlers hasn't been removed in a lot of instances, even up to today. I think we should keep that in mind. I think we should also keep the fact that when oil deposits were discovered on these lands, the said oil companies found the owners, established who the owners were as per the cadastral plan and come down the road, met and treated with the owners, and we have instances, I have in my possession an instance of a deed, present-day deed, with 13 family members, obviously their business is in order, 13 family members' name on the deed, and these people getting oil rights from Petrotrin up to the 1990s. So I think the fact that between the cadastral plan and the fact that the oil companies has been able to trace owners, we should very well keep that in mind. But as I said, the recommendation that American lands be declared a heritage site, that's what we are looking at also. Thank you.
Ms. Jennings-Smith?
I heard you speak about 16 acres given to Americans, right? I want to find out what is the position with occupation. I'm getting a sense that these lands are very much unoccupied. Can you tell me something more about occupation from then to now?
What I could tell you is this, is that the prime spots in those areas have been taken by businessmen, on the New Grant Road, the Indian Walk Road, Moruga. The prime spots have been taken by businessmen and people, some people who just claim in land. A large percentage of the land is really unoccupied, but the problem is the land is landlocked. So you have only front spots and no access to the back areas.
Mr. Chairman, if I might make an intervention as the person who flagged this issue to the committee. Now, the American arrival was unusual in the sense that you had freed people of African origin coming to a community or a society where slavery was still existing. But it was not unusual given that there were immigrants coming in who would be given land grants. For example, the schedule of population, different context, different imperatives, but a similar history. Immigrants coming to Trinidad being given granted land, crown land, for specific reasons. The difference is that whereas under the cedula, those French immigrants would have been given title to their lands. The Merikins, when they arrived in a colonial society that was still dominated by the ethos of slavery, were not provided that legal basis. Meaning they were given land, but they were not given the title to the land. So what you have is this understanding that this 16 acres of land is yours, but you don't have any documentary evidence saying that, because it will be difficult for you to locate someone who can find a title from 1816, which is the year of the arrival of the group, saying that you have a claim to this land. The titles that have been identified by the members actually date from a generation or two subsequent to that, and it might have been additional land that they may have purchased. So I, for example, have had personal interaction with members of the community, and what happens is that, okay, this parcel of land, and sometimes because of the loss of the knowledge, you're not exactly sure how far the land extends, but you know this land is yours. So your grandfather would have built a house, your great-grandfather would have built a house. When it comes your time, they will say, okay, take a piece of land and build a house. But there is no exactitude in it because of the historical conundrum created by these freed former slaves coming to a society where slavery still exists, and where you have to be careful that their presence doesn't lead to insurrection, which was the fear that, even though Governor Ralph Woodford wanted them to arrive, there was that fear that these immigrants could cause social problems. So it is a historical conundrum. So you'll find that I'm not sure if I could ask if anyone is aware that any person in the community has a title dating back from that original time of arrival. It's highly unlikely because of those circumstances. So that might help to explain that what might seem today to be unoccupied.
I just want clarity with you. So Mr. Burton, he read something a while ago. What does that refer to?
It refers to a royal grant for crown lands which was sold to my grandfather.
Right. So that would have been additional land purchased by her grandfather, which would not have been part of the original parcel of land, crown land, given to or provided to each head of family. It would have been a different issue.
If I may, through the chair, at the risk of giving legal advice from the committee bench, but and I agree with what my fellow members have said about the complexity of it, but that sounds, Mr. Burton, as it was a conveyance. It's not an original grant. But what I want to ask is, has there been any precedent set where a Macon member has gone to the high courts, for instance, of Trinidad and Tobago and been granted land on that basis? Mm-hmm. That could open an avenue of legitimacy for others to follow, as a precedent would have been set. Is there any sort of history of that sort of claim being successful?
To my knowledge, it have one particular case in the community. I think the case of Lena Gilead versus the Third Company Baptist Church. That case was in the High Court, and the Court of Appeal made a decision on it. Yeah. Successfully, yes.
Of who, the original owner?
In favor of the church. Yeah.
Add some clarification for that as well. It's already been mentioned that the Baptist faith and the Baptist churches were the cornerstones of the American communities. What would have happened is that many of those patriarchs in the community would have granted land to the membership of a church to establish churches. So might have been a case where someone now is claiming ownership of land that would have been granted to the land by the person who was the original grantee. So adding even more complexity to an already complex situation.
The person who granted the land was my great-great-grandfather, William Weston. He gave the church and the churchyard. Yes, yeah.
Brings me back to the original question. Have there been any decisions in terms of the claim being American claim?
The church on American land, but to say if it's American claim,
it would not be an individual claim. It would be the church as a proxy. Yeah.
Are there any other questions from members?
Thank you very much. Let me first say that I agree with Minister Khan that this is going to be a very complex issue, both legally, via legislation. I would hate to see that your grandchildren will be before a committee in 20 years still fighting this battle. If I would, from all that I heard for the morning, one of the things, now I'm very excited about this issue being a student of history. I have deep roots in the Princestown area also. My grandfather came from six companies, so I'm aware of a lot of the areas and the landowning in the area. So I am excited to see that we move forward. And being a student of history like Minister Lovell, we may need, in terms of a suggestion from you, what are some of the alternatives, barring the granting of physical title and land? And I know Minister Khan spoke about probably demarking a heritage site that can, be used for a number of purposes, both historical, commercial, that sits in line with your association. And not only in terms of a heritage site, but I think the history is so rich in terms of the American society that perhaps consideration from the government of the day to look at historical observances, perhaps integrating some of the history into the school curriculum. I think this is the way how we will celebrate the American society and the history, the heritage in Trinidad and Tobago. Perhaps a museum of some sort with documents, artifacts, deeds. So at the end of the day, they may be lower hanging fruit, but we may be able to accomplish something in the shorter term in terms of validating the heritage and making it, and perhaps in some future disposition in terms of an administration, a government, a committee, that we may get closer to looking at the land issues. But it's just a suggestion that I think that the association should really look at in terms of looking at some alternatives in lieu of not having to wait 20, 25 years to go through legal battles with land and squatting. And there are a lot of the issues with regularization, 16 years of tenureship. Those things will drag this on. So perhaps, a conversation around that line may be very important. Have you all done any alternative suggestions so far, perhaps? Thank you.
Chairman, I think it's an appropriate time for me to run through some of the recommendations that we have, because a lot of things is being said around these things. So I just want to put this on the table. For example, the first thing is that we feel strongly that the land grants to the 441 families totaling 6,000 plus acres, we feel that this land should be surveyed, it should be marked out. As a matter of fact, we have a signage project going on in the group for all the companies. And the land should be deemed heritage lands. Now, also legislation must be enacted to protect the bloodland. And designation of these lands as heritage lands bring with it worldwide attention, the need for preservation and conservation. We are saying that itemizing the land as heritage land and using the legal system we have to look at this conundrum of history and try to sort out the matter. Thirdly, a committee should be set up to identify the fraudulent land transfer issues we have alluded to. Recently, evidence have been, as was said earlier, have been produced by the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago that there is rampant fraudulent acquisition of land issues in the country. The same occurred and the same continues to occur in the American community. Next, we ask that any decision to be made concerning American lands, Merikins Incorporated, and I dare say other American groups must be part of the decision-making process. We ask that American registry with state sanction. This is to track lineage, to track genealogy. We feel that the words of Queen Victoria on the original land grant document, to him and his heirs in perpetuity, we feel those words must have some meaning, it must be brought to have some meaning in this time. It's different, but we're seeing that. And finally, Merikins Inc. advocates a national awareness campaign to highlight Americanism in general. We feel strongly that the school curriculum should reflect that reality. And I'm saying a lot of things have come out of those recommendations that we are making, and we could continue to discuss them.
We would like to highlight the fact that we understand that this might be a ticklish issue, but our vision is not one of material value. Ours is about cultural legacy, and we do not think that you could put a monetary value on cultural legacy. That has been, as we said before, our recurring theme has been towards a richer heritage, and our cultural legacy does not have a monetary value.
Let me just add one thing. As a former principal, a former school supervisor in the area, this American thing, Southeast has been one of the poorest performing educational districts in the country. And as an educator in the area, my thing is, these kids, these people don't know themselves. They're not really proud of, where they have come from. We have to take this into consideration when we deciding what we will do about the Americans and the American community. I believe that the youths in particular need to understand the past, need to understand how great their foreparents were. The Americans were runaway slaves in the United States, running an underground railroad from Miami straight up to Canada. You run away from any estate and join them, join the underground, And then the British finding that they're hot, guerrilla boys, they can't tackle them, they're going after them, join them in the army, and the British, they fought for the British. And then they came down here. We have been trying to popularize this thing about what it really means to be an American descendant. And this whole exercise, we see it in that context of bringing this whole thing alive in the Moruga community. Thank you.
But one question. What exactly is the American heritage in the context of the historical development of Trinidad and Tobago and your unique culture? Is it the Baptist faith also?
That's part of it. That's part of it.
But how much a part of it is it?
It's a big part. It's a big part.
Americans about the Baptist religion?
The Americans brought the Baptist religion from the southern United States. Then they established a number of churches. The English came in and tried to put in some reforms and so on. And there is a constant battle between these reforms and keeping the thing as original as possible. But you asked the question about how we see the history as being, and the Americans as being important in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. When we came here, slavery was going on. Slavery was going on in Trinidad and Tobago. We were free men. The society was watching at us. And we were going out from the American communities. Fellas was working all over the country as tradesmen, mechanics. They were really assisting in the development of the southern part of Trinidad and Tobago. They worked in the oil fields. My father was Moruga, Indian work, and I spent my whole life in Faizabad, where he worked until he retired, and we went back to Moruga Road to live. So Merikins played a critical role in the development of southern Trinidad.
If I might add some more historical context again, seems to be my rule for today. The Baptist faith as it exists today in Trinidad has had a number of inputs, many of them also Caribbean. That movement in St. Vincent, which we call Shakerism, has had some part to play in the development of the faith. But the mecca of the Baptist faith in Trinidad is the American community. And that's every single strand of the faith, including the spiritual Southern Baptists, London Baptists, Independent Baptists. We get all of these different strains of Baptists in part because of the intervention of missionaries, and it causes a number of schisms. There are those who wanted to or preferred to parley with the missionaries. There were those who rejected the intervention of the missionaries, and that relationship ends up in part in determining all these different strains of Baptists that we have today. But all of them owe their origin to the American community. So it's not that the Americans are responsible for the early economic development of Moruga, which they were. They cut the first road into Moruga all the way to Marak, because basically, you need to understand what was given to the Americans was virgin crown land, basically forests. And the fact that there is any community today in Trinidad called Moruga has to do with the development of the American people. So it's not just infrastructural development, it's not just economic development, it's not just populating what was a very underpopulated area, has to do with religion and culture and all of that as well. So the impact and the contributions are numerous, are varied. Thank you.
Don't leave out education, sir. The Baptist faith, through the Baptist
And
Union of
education.
Trinidad and Tobago, provided education. Fifth Company Baptist School is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Cowan Hamilton Secondary School, the only Baptist secondary school in the country, is 53 years old this year. And American communities in Marak, we have a Marak Baptist School Primary, and in First Company, Hindustan, we have Hindustan Baptist School. And these people concentrated on education, educated their children. Sunday, when we were celebrating West Indies victory, we have two Americans on the team in Melissa Aguilera and Cooper. Cooper is from Mandingo Road, heart of American community, and Marissa is from Marak, and she still lives home, American community again. So we have contributed, and we continue to contribute to the development of Trinidad and Tobago, and by by the wider Caribbean also.
Yeah. So imagine the irony that there's a community that was transplanted here that faced, the worst aspects of a frontier experience, that still somehow managed to make all these contributions towards the development of the society. And at the end of all that, at the end of all of your contributions, you don't have the simplest thing that one would want to have, which is title to the land that you know is yours. Imagine that historical irony. This is what this community essentially faces up to today, after 200 years of not being called American, but being very, very Trinbagonian.
I would want to use this opportunity to press a note on my baby in all this. There is a 15-acre block on the cadastral marked American, marked recreational purposes. Indian Walk does not have a recreation ground. And we're watching this 15 acres there, and we are saying, if there's anything called heritage land, that should be heritage land. And we would like to get the British who gave it to us to probably come in with us, come in with the Americans, and really set up a top-of-the-line facility. Sporting, well, recreation, that word recreation could go all out. When you look at the topography, we have the survey map that was done by the last government. When you look at the survey map, it really needs some top-of-the-line consultants to say what to do with this land to make it into a recreational something. And I hope in a forum like this, some kind of work really gets underway in that area, on that particular facility.
Let me make an intervention here. To me, this is a good starting point, because if there's an identity, the whole issue is extremely complex, as you realize, and if it could be solved at all, it will take years or decades to solve. But at least if we can look for some low-hanging fruits, at least to say that something is being done for this community, I think we can flag this area here. I would even offer, as Minister of Rural Development, to take charge of this project and see if I could bring some conclusion to it in terms of researching the land title and coming up with a plan with coordinating with your MP and your community to see if we can establish this initially as a heritage site for a governance structure, and at least to start to seed something fundamental in the American community.
I'd just like to be looking for a lot from Dr. Lovell Francis, because MP Taylor first went in, drew some buildings and so on. We have those buildings. MP Dikoto got some consultants. NIPDEC is the managing the project. They surveyed the land. That is as far as we reach. And we want to take it, we really want to take that thing further.
We would like the committee to realize that we would like the committee to realize that we have been working, that we have been trying, we have been plodding, and we haven't given up, and we don't intend to give up anytime soon. And Mr. Khan, low-hanging fruit is food too.
In that context, I made it. Let's make one final point before I close. It's an area I feel strongly about also. I don't want to bring politics too much into this thing. The PNM did in fact host a Baptist celebration in Balize House last week. And I made a short address. And I spoke about Americans, and especially in the context of us trying to rewrite our history to suit our purposes, because our history has been written by other people. And the point I made was that today we call them faith healers. And today we call them psychics. But to our old people used to call them Sia woman and Obia men. And I refer specifically to two Moruga folk heroes, which is Papa Niza and Mother Cornhawks. And ask the average Trinidadian, and they will say, them is Obia men, them is a Obia woman, in a derogatory sense. I had the privilege of meeting Mother Cornhawks before she died in 2001. She was a phenomenal faith healer.
She was.
And I won't tell you what she told me. But I just want the records to show that when the history of Trinidad is rewritten, these folk heroes have played their role, and they should be so recognized.
Okay. I want to thank the members of the committee, for their patience and their forbearance in listening to an American tale. I also wish to assure the Merikins Incorporation that this, though it may be the second presentation of Merikins to an official state agency, because I'm aware that there was a commission of inquiry in the latter part of the 19th century with regard to the disposition of the American situation in Moruga, and that largely the infrastructure development that was pursued, limited as it were, at that time came as a result of that commission of inquiry. But we are fortunate, of course, today in having on this committee the minister with responsibility for local government and particularly rural development, so that we will hold him to his word and spearheading the corrective measures that we all agree may be necessary in this situation. So before we close, I would like to afford the Vice President of Merikins Incorporated an opportunity to close your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the head table, and other members of the Joint Select Committee, again, I must say a hearty and well-felt thank you for your patience and for the way you have listened to us and have understood our position at this point in time. We look forward in the future to having more discussions with you as we plod forward to realize our dream of American heritage. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. And I wish you a safe journey. Return to your southernmost residences. Have a pleasant day.
So let's suspend for 5 minutes.
We'll now suspend the sitting for 5 minutes before we resume with our other guests. Members of the viewing and listening audience, of course, can send comments via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament, or on Twitter at ttparliament. Again, welcome to the officials of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, and I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to introduce yourselves to the committee.
Good morning, all. I am Dano Suku, President of the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago, Chairperson of the Committee of Management, President of the North Manzalina Farmers Association, Regional Director of the Caribbean Farmers Network, a member of the Regional Steering Committee of the European Union Agriculture Policy Program that has been funded under the 10th EDF Fund, and a member of the Steering Committee of the CTA Value Chain Program that has been implemented in 8 CARIFORUM countries.
Good morning, everyone. I am Mohammed Halim, and I'm the Vice President of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, and I've been on the board since the year 2004. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Brinich. I'm a director of the Agricultural Society board. I'm also the youth officer of the North Manzan Group. I'm also a committee member of the Plantation Road Aquaculture Association. Plantation. Thank you.
Pleasant good morning. Nawaz Karim, disciplinary chairman of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, president of the Maloney Farmers Association, and I'm also a farmer.
Good morning. My name is Frank Ali. I'm a director on the board of the Agriculture Society. I'm also the president of the Progressive Bornese Farmers Association.
Okay. All right. I, of course, am Senator Stephen Crease, independent senator and chairman of this committee. I will now like the members of my committee, starting on the right, to introduce themselves to you.
Good morning. Rushton Parry. I'm the vice chairman of the committee. I'm also the member of parliament for Mayaro.
I welcome Member of Parliament for Diego Martin Central, Darrell Smith.
Senator Franklin Khan, Minister of Rural Development and Local Government member.
Dr. Lavelle Francis, member from Murunga Tableland, member.
Morning, welcome, Senator Daniel Solomon.
Good morning, all. Glenda Jennings-Smith, Member of Parliament for Togo Sangre Grande and Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of National Security.
Okay. I would like to make sure that we either put our cell phones on silent or deactivate them. But I now would invite the society, Agricultural Society, to make a presentation to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. The Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, having just passed 175 years of existence, as an Act of Parliament, Chapter 6301, has a mandate to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. In our instructing manual, in our Act, it clearly outlines the society's role and function. Most important is to assist in the advancement of the agriculture sector in Trinidad and Tobago, all branches of agriculture. The Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago take the issue of land tenancy, the regularization of farmers on state agricultural land, as the catalyst for agriculture development in Trinidad and Tobago. There can be no diversification, there can be no food security if, as a government, we do not treat with the issue of land tenancy in this country. In 2012, the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations published a document, Responsible Governance of Tenure, that will guide the 189 nations of the United Nations in the context of food security, how best these guidelines can be implemented in each of the countries to assist in tenancy of farmers and occupants of lands. If I may read, in this guideline, as it states, the eradication of hunger and poverty and the sustainable use of the environment depend in large measures on how people, communities, and others gain access to land, fisheries, and forests. The livelihoods of many, particularly the rural poor, are based on secure and equitable access to and control over these resources. They are the source of food and shelter, the basis for social, cultural, and religious practices, and a central factor in economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen of this committee, Trinidad and Tobago, its history has proven that we have been practicing and still do weak governance of tenure in this country. And what has weak governance of tenure allowed us to be today? It has allowed us to marginalize the poor. It has allowed us to make already social and economically marginalized women more vulnerable. Weak governance have allowed us to hinder the progress of our rural people. It is in this context that we appreciate this discussion before this Joint Select Committee. We do not expect our presence here today to be part of a continued talk shop of which this country has been accustomed to. Over the last few years, we have advocated publicly in every arena that was possible, even on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, the importance of tenure of land to the people. If we are really serious about food security to Trinidad and Tobago, ladies and gentlemen, we must address this issue. We at the Agriculture Society submit ourselves today to this committee because we have recognized that like most of Trinidad and Tobago, that it is bad policies and bad politics that has brought us to the mercy of the rest of the world, where we have now so grown accustomed as a country to imported food. And we present ourselves here today to this committee, and we hope that this discussion will chart a new way forward for the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Does any other member of your committee wish to address our committee?
Well, my intervention here would be specifically to youth and the social ills of society presently. I come from a community that is somewhat high risk, you know, the Windy Hill area. I farm in the Maloney area, so we are accustomed to the crime activities in the area. And we have seen through the Agriculture Society for the last 4 years or so, trying to promote youths to get into agriculture and basically stop liming on the block. We have been successful so far in doing this, but you see, you want youths to be farmers. You don't want them to be farm workers. And to go from a farm worker to a farmer, one of the most important things is land. So today I want to commend the committee for giving the ASTT the opportunity to be here to express our concerns. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I have been around in the agricultural sector. My whole career has been with the Ministry of Agriculture since 1969. In that year, I was an extension officer who had to look after the needs of farmers in terms of incentives, for example. And since 1969 to now, the same problems that occurred then is occurring today. For example, farmers need land tenure to get an incentive. And since 1969, we were not able to give incentives to our farmers. From that time and up to today, those same farmers that I know, well, most of them have died really, because I was a younger man and they were older people. But many of the farmers that I knew, still up to this day, which is 40 years later or more, they still do not have tenancy to their land. So the problems remain and they stay there. And hopefully, with a forum like this, we could find ways and means of quickening up the process of getting these people some legal status. Thank you.
Does any other member of the society wish to speak? Okay. The floor is now open to members of the committee.
Good morning, everyone. Full disclosure, I did my PhD dissertation on agriculture, specifically the sugar industry, but the references will translate. When I was doing my research, I came across a dissertation from 1963 by someone, subsequently a Dr. Mirage, talking about what is wrong with agriculture in Trinidad in particular. His evaluation was that land tenure was the issue. His, the main specific recommendation was that we need to look at the size of holdings as the main component of that issue. What I'm really asking you, what I want to ask you is, the specifics of the problem in terms of land tenure, can you outlay them for us? Thank you.
The food that is being presently produced in this country is produced, 80% of that food that is being produced is produced by what we term squatters in this country. Approximately 80 to 85% of the farmers, the food producers, are untenanted. We find this most prevalent in the rural communities in the Sangre Grande, Plomitan, Mayaro, Rio Claro area. There is some level of agriculture production along the east-west corridor, including Maloney, Orange Grove, Bonnet. As we go down into the central and the Felicity area, in the Bonavente, Gasparilla area. All of these areas that I have just called, there is less than 1% of farmers, food producers, that has any tenancy to these lands.
But are they farming on state lands?
Yes, sir, they are all of these areas that I have just called, and there's much more that we can let you know by written information. We can produce that information. They are all untenanted.
How do they farm in the first place? They just went and farmed, or did they have an initial tenancy that expired that was not renewed? Because they can't be lawlessness either. So you just can't appear on a piece of state land and say, I'm farming it, so I'm a farmer, so I have some rights. There has to be order. So what I'm asking you, if there are so many untenanted land, is it because they were quote-unquote illegally occupied, or is it because bureaucracy in the system that has not been giving them their agricultural leases?
I will say both, but more so the bureaucracy in the system. If you look traditionally how farmers were supposed to be tenanted on lands, and we look at the institutions, we look at the divisions that was responsible for having these farmers given their rights, their tenure to these lands, there's an entire breakdown in the system. What we have seen is 2 and almost 3 generations of occupants of these lands that are still untenanted. Let's take, for example, to my extreme left here is Mr. Nawaz Karim. He's a 3rd generation farmer farming in the Maloney food crop area. He's now regarded as the hot pepper king of the world. Recent reports coming out of the United States reveal that the best hot pepper entering the U.S. market is coming from Mr. Karim's farm in Maloney. And he's also a 3rd generation squatter. It is the responsibility of the state, it has always been and still rests with the state, to look into this aspect and regularize farmers. So a great part of the problem lies with the institution, the way, the bureaucracy within the system that has not allowed the individuals to be tenanted.
Chairman, I was in...
Okay, I'll give way. I'd like to start with some of the policies that were in place. Can you tell me as chairman, Madam President, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you tell me of instances in Trinidad of persons who were legitimate farmers who got lands legitimately for farming purposes? Can you tell me of what percentage of those engaged in farming to any large extent?
To my knowledge, there is a percentage, I will say probably about 7% of individuals who would have had some tenancy to land still engaged in farming. What we have recognized at the Agriculture Society, having gone on the ground over the past few years, is that there has been issued to many individuals tenancy to land under the pretext of farming and agriculture, which never occurred. And the genuine farmers of this country are the ones that have not been tenanted. If you look in the Orange Grove area, for example, there is 434 acres, I think, approximate, that is tenanted to a particular company. But behind that 434, you have over 1,000 acres of agricultural lands that is under production. And not one of those farmers over the last 30 years have been tenanted on those lands.
Of the 7%, that 7% is from the 85% you spoke about?
No,
So that's
7% will be about 7% who actually have some tenancy in their hand.
Right.
About 80 to 85% of the farmers, the food producers are still yet untenanted.
Right, and what is the process? So, are any of that 85% closer to it now? Is there a process going on or any negotiations or talks going on that a percentage of that 85 is moving forward at all, or is it all a stalemate right now?
Well, sir, in 2009, if I may go back, and I want to present this to this honorable gathering here today. In 2009, then Minister Pigott, who was the Minister of Agriculture, we would have had a meeting with Mr. Pigott and to address this issue of land regularization. The Agriculture Society proposed a process where we can look at, I don't want to use the word fast tracking, but we could accelerate in the process. And we got buy-in from the minister. What it entails is the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago coming together with a team that will partner with the ministry's extension division. And we went out on the fields and we did what was called an occupation survey of the lands. And in so doing, we used Plomiton Food Crop Project as the area that we will treat with first. And we went in there and we did what was called an occupation notice. We took up plot by plot the individuals who are actually farming the land and not a person who would have applied for the land. We were able to identify in that process vacant plots of land. What we have seen coming out of that program in 2013, where 120 individuals, I think it was the largest distribution of leases in this country, coming out of that program, where they were able, the process was certified by the stakeholder, which was the Agriculture Society and the Ministry of Agriculture Extension Division, and we were able to see some 120 farmers being given their tenancy.
Can you
And
say,
further, if I may add, sir, further to that, what we did, we tied the issue of land tenancy to food production in the context of food security. So we then proposed in the project document we had submitted then, we proposed a holistic development of these communities. So what we did in regularizing the farmers, we went in and ensured that there was proper irrigation systems, we ensured there was proper infrastructure, roadways and so on, proper drainage for the farmers, and we were also able to introduce the Agriculture Development Bank to provide financing to these farmers. We were able to put a proper crop production schedule model in place that will allow some level of sustainable production for particular commodities. And that is how we were able in around 2012, 2013 to have supplied certain franchises, restaurants in this country with cucumbers coming out of that project in Plomiton.
Morning, Madam President. I am hearing a lot of good things coming out of the Agriculture Society, and listening to what you would have said in terms of the conversation with Minister Pigott back in 2009, it tells me that, you know, the Agriculture Society is well-oiled and well-tooled to push this process forward. Now, in your view, if you were to identify the top 5 reasons why legitimate farmers in legitimate areas are having difficulties in getting their lease processed in a timely fashion, what would you determine as the top 5 or 6 areas that is bottlenecking the process? Thank you.
Presently, there exists a system at the ministry that is dependent on a public officer to go out there in the fields and collect data and information and make recommendations. That has been the catalyst for this process not being efficiently operated. Many a times, these officers, they go on the field, but they stay in a sheltered area. There is no verification of whether these individuals actually farm on these lands, the level of production. So we are saying that that is one of the major problems, the identification process. And we were able to prove that in the 2009 program that we did with Mr. Pigot, where the Agriculture Society, the stakeholder body, went out there and led the way in gathering this kind of information. So one, the present circumstances that exist with the relevant personnel, it has to be changed. So we need to have more stakeholder intervention, and who knows farmers best but is farmers. And the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago, being the legal voice for the farming community, is the institution most poised to treat with this issue. Secondly, when this information is collected at that level, it goes now to your land management unit, your regional offices. Again, we are dealing with public officers, people who work 8 to 4. Right? We are not dealing with individuals who have a real passion, have a stakeholder in this process, is a stakeholder in this process. So what we are seeing even at that point, the terms of verification of the information that came forward from the county offices, the time they have to go back to the farms to verify whether that information is correct, how much of it is correct, that's another sticking point. Again, if at the very early stage you had the stakeholder sign-off participation in the process, we would have alleviated that bottleneck situation. My third point is that when all of this information is collected, many a times you have an issue with the survey, the director of surveys. Sometimes you have a survey plan that is not approved. So when you reach probably at the land management unit, they will say, okay, yes, we do have this, but this plan, it is surveyed, there is your cadastral, but it has not been approved maybe by tongue and country planning, because they also have to approve. And I will use a classic example. The Maloney Food Crop Project, which has been surveyed for over 25 years, those farmers could not have been regularized. And when the Agriculture Society went in to investigate why, it is because the lay-by road, when you turn right on the traffic light that takes you to Best Street, that lay-by road that was constructed there was not appearing on the map. So tongue and country could not have approved the survey plan. So there it is, you don't have the agencies that is responsible for guaranteeing these farmers their legal right, their tenancy to these lands. There is these agencies all operating in silos. There is not a common ground for the operation of these agencies. So we need to really and truly find a mechanism, some stakeholder committee, some stakeholder platform that could bring the agencies more regular together to address some of these issues. And may I say, number 5, sir, I know we're in a room of politicians, but sometimes it is the politicians who stand in the way. As I said in my opening remarks, sometimes we just don't have the political will to do that. We have the political will to deal with other issues, housing and industries and everything else. And only because we are now faced with a foreign exchange crisis and everything else, we are now finding the agriculture conversation so interesting. So sometimes it is the political will to get the job done. We're not seeing that political will. I always emphasize to people when I speak that 2009, Minister Pigot, and when Mr. Noel Garcia was brought in as the chairman of EMBD, ADB, and NAMDEVCO, the sector had really taken a positive turn. So we were seeing that kind of intervention, direct intervention that is required. So maybe you need a Noel Garcia in the sector to drive this process forward, because, he had engaged the Agriculture Society and we were partners in this process.
No, nothing is new. You know, things happen all the time. I'm sure out there worldwide, and you all will be doing your research, that there have been situations such as Trinidad and Tobago's right now, that a country was able to become over it and get over it and do certain policies and procedures to ensure that it was cleared up. Is there any country that was similar to where we are at now that was able to break through and get things cleaned up that you all know of? A model that was done anywhere in the world, in the Caribbean or in the Americas, to be precise?
I can't say, but what I could say is that the model we did in Plomiton and the processes that the Agriculture Society had put forward and we were going forward with in 2009. In 2013, as president of the Agriculture Society, I was invited by the United Nations to address the Global Commodities Forum in Geneva. And at that forum, I had the opportunity to address on the issue of poverty eradication in using agriculture and the development of rural communities. And I used that Trinidad and Tobago model, and I put forward that to the United Nations. And my understanding is that that information was being used, you know, in other countries as to involve more stakeholder development in the process.
Through you, Chair. I really want to go back to my first question. I don't think you answered my question. Because, you know, as a citizen, I drive through Trinidad and I see many places which were declared as agricultural areas, which I now see huge buildings, for example, the Aranguez area. As an agricultural society, tell me, what are some of your concerns with regard to that? Because as a citizen, you expect places which were regularized for agriculture to engage in large-scale farming. And I really recognize Mr. Karim, and I want to compliment you on your hot peppers recent success on the market. And, you know, these are the places that young people would look to and realize that they could have a future in agriculture. And if it is that government would have given out large parcels of lands to some people, and then it is seen that you see concrete structures going up on lands which were identified as agricultural lands. What you as an agricultural society, what have you done about those things? To promote, you know, because we're talking about land tenancy and regularization for land for agriculture. And as a government, we must be concerned as to the process we would engage in regularizing land. Bearing in mind, these are some of the situations that have occurred in the past, right? What are some of your concerns in going forward?
To answer your question directly, we do have a concern with so many arable agricultural lands throughout this country that we now see industries and housing. And back in 2011, I was that individual who led that march through Port-of-Spain for almost 2 weeks, advocating for a land use policy for Trinidad and Tobago. We were promised it in 2011. We are now in 2016, and we are yet to see or yet to be called forward to participate in any discussion on a land use policy for Trinidad and Tobago. The issue of these concrete structures being on these land, the state is the regulatory body that is responsible for ensuring that when you give someone a parcel of land for agriculture purpose, that it remains in agriculture. This is why you have a land management unit at the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And as I indicated earlier, one of the problems is because we have a serious breakdown in the operation management at these institutions. So who is there out there? The Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago, we are doing our very best. At present, we do not have an office. We do not have any resources available to us to continue that exercise that we started in 2009 and continued up to 2013. So we ourselves are very constrained in even fulfilling our mandate as enshrined in our Act Chapter 6301.
Mr. Chair.
Madam President, you've made a statement there about no office space and so on. And as a statutory board, are you funded by the state?
Annually, the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago receives a grant as approved by the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. We write our request to the Minister of Finance. We sit in the roundtable discussion with the Minister of Finance. We also propose policies and programs as to setting forward a direction for the agriculture sector. Since 2013, through someone's political decision, the Agriculture Society was deprived of its funding, even into 2014, 2015, we are now in 2016, and we are still left without an office, although there's a line item in that approval from the Ministry of Finance for rental of office space for the society. The society also has, as part of its assets, 2 vehicles, of which we have no use for 2015 and 2016. We are now paying thousands of dollars. We are spending thousands of dollars transporting members of the committee throughout the country, and we are a 26-member committee that is strategically located throughout this country, as far as Lucero to Rio Claro to Plumiton, all over our 26 directors we come from. So when we sit as the Agriculture Society, we discuss agriculture, Trinidad and Tobago. So at this point, our hands are tied, our feet is tied. We are a group of people that has the power, power in the sense of the energy, we have the drive, we have the commitment to support an initiative of regularizing farmers, but the status of the society, according to the politicians, does not allow it to go forward.
Would you say, Madam President, that have you brought this to the attention of the Honorable Minister of Agriculture in terms
Since September of last year, sir, I would have met the Honorable Minister when he came into office, and prior to that, we would have had discussions, and since September, we have been begging at the ministry's doors to have this process regularized. We have a 4-member staff that comes from the Statutory Authorities Service Commission, and imagine almost 2 years, 4 public officers, a secretary range 54D, assistant secretary, a clerk, steno, and a messenger that has been paid by the taxpayers of this country and is performing no duties, no function on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. They are all in an office somewhere down in Sinclair.
I might ask a different question.
Go ahead, sir.
How much of the current food needs of this nation does the farming community provide? And the next part is a bit unfair, but I'll ask it anyway. How much do you expect, if we rationalize this problem within a reasonable period, how much do you expect that to improve?
What I'm about to say to you, sir, is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes,
so
sir.
help me God. So, sir, presently, based on our food consumption, I will say we are producing somewhere around 15–20%, maybe less, not more. It could be less. If you go back to 10 years ago, there are records at NAMDEVCO that will show that we were exporting to one country, Barbados, over 1.5 million pounds of fresh agriculture produce. 10 years ago, we were loading 6 40-foot containers of pumpkin to North America and Canada. We were then the food basket of the region. So, over the years, when we had the shutdown of Carney Limited, and as you know, on those Carney lands, there were a lot of private tenants, and we had these individuals removed from those lands. Since then, we will recall the crisis we had in 2007, 2008 with escalating food prices. All of these were contributing factors for individuals being removed from lands that they were farming for over a number of years. So I can say for the second question that you ask, if this process is addressed, if this issue of land tenancy is addressed, and not just addressed, it must be addressed in an effective and efficient way in the context of food security. I can safely say that there is no reason that within the next 3 years, we cannot be producing 65% of the food that we consume. And the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago, once given the resources or tools, we are prepared to hold the hands of those in power, those in authority, and assist this process in achieving that goal.
I speak as a member of parliament for Toco Sangre Grande, which is a noted area for agriculture and lots of land area. And I can say that I have had the privilege of touring that area with our Minister of Agriculture over entire weekend, where we not only looked at land, but we looked at fisheries and other type of development for agriculture. And I want to ask you, as President, Madam President, you know, have you brought other recommendation to our minister with regard to acquisition of estates? Because in Toko, Matura, Toko, Matlat, and those areas, we have huge amount of lands just lying there. Have you all, as an agriculture society, have you done any research into areas which you could maybe recommend to the minister for acquisition relative to some kind of agricultural engagement? And I'll ask another question to Mr. Karim. As an agriculture society, you spoke about farmers, young people being farmers and not farm workers, and I really like that statement. As a body, have you done any engagement or any plans or any sensitization for young people to get them interested in farming, you know, especially in my area where there are a number of young people unemployed, and they too are seeking ways and means where they can make a contribution to this country, Trinidad, especially now when we need to get food to feed our nation. So could you please tell me if you have that, if you have done that? I know too there is an area in Valencia where some young people are engaging in tilapia farming, and they need that kind of a guidance. Could you tell me what you have done so far as the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago?
You go ahead.
Well, first of all, as our act would say, we have to disseminate information and knowledge. What we basically do on the society, and as young persons as myself and Frank, and many of us are young, basically under the age of 40, right? We go to the farming communities, mostly rural communities, and we promote agriculture. What the society also does, we try to bring young persons into successful farms, right? So for instance, we are going to have some workshop soon in the Maloney area, Orange Grove area, North Manzan area. But I want to add here, and I want to plead also to this committee, you may have the will, right? You dedicate your time to Trinidad and Tobago, but when you are placed in a situation that the society is in presently, it is difficult, very difficult for you to have any level of success. And I wanna just deviate a bit to explain something. This hot pepper article was something that it basically rocked the world, right? And what happened is that we got investors, persons from the United States calling us in Trinidad, wanting to get involved in this Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm going to repeat it, Trinidad and Tobago hot pepper, right? And they will ask you questions, you know, they want to know how you operate down here. And one of the critical things was land tenure. Because if they are to come here and ask you, and they to come here to invest in your operation, and you don't have land tenure, they don't want to be part and parcel of that. I mean, it's obvious, that's the sense. And for too long in Trinidad, and I don't want to be lashing the politicians here, but this is how I see it as a farmer, and I've been farming for quite some time, straight out of school, and I'm now 34, right? The sector is dying. Right? And we are out there night and day as the Agriculture Society promoting agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. The government now is talking agriculture, as the president said, because of the issues with the economy and whatnot. But we have been doing it all the time. And for some reason, we don't seem to get the support from the politicians. And it's really real disheartening, right, for this to keep continuing in 2016. So I personally is pleading to this committee and to the government of the day, let us stop the talking. I've been to many talk shops. I get fed up, right? Let us really get something done and do something for agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. And one thing I feel proud, when I go to New York and Miami, right, and you see hot pepper there, and hear this thing, and I feel proud about that because I could identify with Trinidad hot pepper anywhere in the world. But you know what I saw in New York? They put on the labeling, Jamaica pepper. It was not Jamaica pepper. It was pepper from my farm, and that is how it was labeled. So we need the assistance of the politician, and we have to work hand in hand to promote this sector. And I want to repeat this. The sector is dying because there are not young persons coming on board, and this land tenure issue is a critical issue. I'm going to state this here. I am on a 100 and something acre parcel of land, and I have been squatting there. And that land was squatting land since 1986, right? We have made applications for land year after year, and we are the producers in Trinidad, and we were never successful, right? So something is fundamentally wrong with the system, right? And we can't take our next 5 or 6 years to fix it. It has to fix now. Thank you.
To answer the earlier question from MP Ms. Smith, whether or not we made recommendations to the minister with regards to the amount of land and you know, how best these lands could be utilized. That was what we started in 2009, continued into 2010, 2011. In 2013, we saw that minister just brushing everything aside. Then came a new minister in September of 2015, and we were very hopeful that we would have re-entered this kind of discussion and close collaborative working relations. However, at a recent seminar workshop at Carrier Suites in Claxton Bay, I heard the minister in his address stated, well, nobody's going to tell him what to do. So I don't know, as the agriculture sector, maybe we will come by Senator Franklin Khan and probably have some discussion on rural development and agriculture. So sometimes, you know, we just don't know where to go, who to talk to, because sometimes you get that kind of response from people. And when you have your line minister makes an open public statement like that, then as the Agriculture Society, where do we go? Who do we talk to? The Commissioner of State Land, and I want to make this point, the Commissioner of State Land in this country is a very, very important person, strategically placed to deal with the issue of land tenure. And when you have to be taking 6 months and only appoint an acting commissioner, and you have to wait another year or so to appoint a commissioner, where do we go? Where is the role of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, who's supposed to be the landlord of this country in this whole context of regularization of farmers and food security and all of these things? So there are people involved in this whole process of land regularization, and the time has come, as young Karim has said, for everyone to step up to the plate and adhere to their responsibility. It is written in black and white. If you go back to the State Lands Act, you will note the responsibilities of each and every one. So, Madam MP, the Agriculture Society is ready and willing to work, especially in your area. The President and almost half the board is from the eastern part of Trinidad, and you know most of the agriculture presently is coming from that area. Valencia have been known to be producing some of the best hot peppers, pimento peppers for export. We have much of our body beans and other commodities coming from that area. We have started work with a group of young men in the plantation area, as we have started in Windy Hill. Part of the Agriculture Society work is to make that kind of social intervention. What we are doing is meeting with these, what we call high-risk youths, and we are getting them involved in agriculture. There was a recent intervention by Frank Ali and Mr. Karim in the Windy Hill area, where we got some 67 young people involved in agriculture. And again, to take them to the next level, we do not have the resources. It is sitting down somewhere in the Ministry of Agriculture by a political decision not to allow the society its resources. In the plantation area, our young guys in plantation, they are using these abandoned gravel pits, right? And they are doing aquaculture. We recently did a one-day crash course with them in aquaculture production. Part of the Agriculture Society work is every month to have the stakeholder platform throughout the country and bring all the stakeholders together to discuss agriculture and its challenges. Again, without the resources and the tools to do so, we cannot. There is a delegation from Panama that is coming to meet with the Agriculture Society. The ambassador to Panama and this delegation is in Trinidad. And where do we have to host them? On a farm. or either the members take money from their pockets, their pocket money, and pay some meeting room to host these people. We have our colleagues coming in from the Caribbean Farmers Network, the Jamaica, Barbados. I am presently leading the marketing program with the Massey stores regionally to try to get, more markets, better market access for our farmers and so on. And where are we meeting? We are meeting on the streets. We have investors ready to come into Trinidad and Tobago to invest in our hot pepper project, to set up some factory to do processing that could earn foreign exchange for this country. Where do we have to host these people? On the streets or on somebody's farming plot. So, ladies and gentlemen, to this committee, we implore you, we ask of you to allow the society, make that recommendation and allow the society to be able to proceed with its work program. All we want to do is fulfill our mandate as enshrined in our act.
Okay, Madam President, just coming back to the issue on the land tenancy, would it be safe to say that one way going forward in terms of moving the process forward, if consideration to the setting up of a special agency or a secretariat that can have components of the Ministry of Agriculture, the EMBD, State Land Division, your society, Caroni 1975 Limited, as a secretariat, do you think having this new secretariat in a unit may be able to speed up that process where you have all arms of the specific agencies sitting under one room looking at these requests for the land tenancy? Do you think that is something that could move this process much faster than the silos that you referred to in your original contribution?
Most definitely, as one of the recommendations to this committee that we are submitting today in going forward and treating with the issue of land regularization is the immediate setting up of this committee that will be meeting at least twice per month, right? Because we must set some time frames and so on to effective this work. Presently, there is some 800 files at the Solicitor General office waiting for regularization, and these files are incomplete. And they were incomplete by whom? So we want to start the process. There is a good starting point. The Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago has identified 17 food baskets in this country, right, that we need to treat with the issue of regularization and infrastructure development. And in so doing, we will start to treat with the food security issues. So there is the urgent call for the setting up of this stakeholder committee. And we are saying that I don't want to say the private sector, the Agriculture Society of Trinidad and Tobago as a legal body must have a representative or representatives on this committee that will make representation on behalf of the farmers. I want to make this point, and it's a very, very important point. Because this process over the years have been left in the hands of public officers, we have evidence, we have information where we have seen these individuals became real estate operators over the years, buying and selling of these state agricultural lands, and that's a fact. So this committee could eliminate some of these corrupt practices that we have grown so accustomed to in this country if we want to treat with the issue of food security.
Yes, Ms. Dina. Where should I start?
From the beginning.
Let me say, as the only member of the cabinet here, I want to make a few comments on behalf of the government. As we speak, we are saddled with a $4 to $5 billion food import bill. As we speak, the agricultural sector contribution to GDP is 0.5%. I've been researching this. I know of no country in the world where agricultural input to GDP is as low as that, 0.1. Even Saudi Arabia higher than that, and Saudi Arabia is only desert. Saddled with significantly declining petroleum revenue. Agriculture coming on the radar as a matter of not choice, but a matter of necessity. This country has to wake up. Previous administration, past administration, I don't want to go back there, but this administration is committed out of both policy directive and necessity that we have to boost agricultural production. Because even though you said land tenure, and I know land tenure is an issue, there isn't a squad now that's putting you out of the land, you know. So in fact, you may be on the land illegally or without title, but there isn't a hit squad putting you out of the land. So still there are other issues in agriculture that has agricultural production so low outside of tenancy. But that's for a different forum. The point we are making is that agriculture, and you use the word rural development on many occasions, because that was the rationale in refocusing the spatial developmental agenda into rural areas. And rural development ministry and local government partner ministry is really agriculture. Okay, so I will be working closely with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Minister of Agriculture in the context of this program. But I want to give you the assurance on behalf of the government that I know you say politicians talk and we provide lip service, but this time lip service will do work, you know, because ladies and gentlemen, this country is in serious crisis when it comes to our numbers, okay? Under no circumstance, and I mean absolutely no circumstance, can we afford a $4 to $5 billion food import bill. So by that token alone, that if that bill has to cut down to $2 billion or $2.5 billion or what, you have to fill the commodity gap somewhere. And it can only be filled by local food production. Luckily, and I say this luckily, a lot of our food import bill is short-term crops. So you don't have to plant a cocoa tree and wait 5 years for it to make chocolate. You're looking for food, and God knows what he's doing when he put food in a short crop scenario. So that we have the timeline now that we can work with. Okay? And I want to give you the assurance on behalf of the government that both the Minister of Agriculture in particular, myself and the Minister of Rural Development will be working closely with you and all the other stakeholders in Trinidad and Tobago. Because what has been happening in Trinidad these days is that in all sectors you see it. Everybody claims to represent something. So you go into sport and 5 groups say they represent basketball. You come into agriculture, the same thing. Okay, so as a government you have to do a dancing act. You're on a tightrope, and you have to engage everybody. So it is our intention to I know you said the minister said nobody will tell them what to do, what have you. But in what context, I don't know what he made that. But the point about it is that we will be engaging with all the stakeholders and try to bring some sanity to this agricultural sector, because the numbers that I drive in my head, I don't want to hear anything else. $5 billion food import bill, unacceptable. 0.5% of GDP, unacceptable. And we have a sheet here that was prepared by the Parliament that shows for each commodity by food group, the current consumption and the current production. And the variance is astronomical. Okay? I'll quote one example here. Sheep and goat. Current consumption, 3,369 tons.
Yeah.
You know what is our production? 355. Good? So that means all that sheep and goat coming from Australia and New Zealand.
Yes.
And while we come close to things like cucumber and pumpkins and stuff, and there's still a major deficit on basic agricultural food items. So there's a lot of work to do. I want to know, to give you the assurance that you have the support of the government, you have the support of the cabinet, and I don't want to sound political, but let's do it together.
Well, you know, sir, in response to you, we are prepared. We have indicated so that we are prepared to do it together. I want to make a point to the MP from Moruga Table and area there. I don't know if you're aware, but in the past years, probably 7, 8 years ago, we exported approximately 20,000 pounds of pineapple weekly to Barbados. And that's the kind of potential that is out there. What we need to do is put the mechanisms in place, and reducing that food import bill, Senator, it's no rocket science. It is just all hands on deck. When the budget was read in Parliament in September, and the media spoke to me and asked me, well, what are your comments? Agriculture just got $800 and something thousand. I said agriculture has nothing to do with the quantum of money. It has to do with the management, the administration of the sector, because agriculture is the most fortunate ministry where you have the people, you have the resources, land, you have your own bank in the ADB. All you have to do is manage the people, and you can get where you want to be. In going forward, apart from us asking for this stakeholder platform, this committee with representation from the Agriculture Society as the legal representative body for farmers, we would also like to see the government of today adopt a new process. From the time someone is given a letter of offer, right, to accept the tenancy to a parcel of land, we must have within 6 months those documents being delivered to that farmer. We mustn't be waiting 15 and 20 years and some offices, some lawyer somewhere. Government must now look at a process, right, that can hasten this task that has been the farmers have faced with.
We're running out of time. I just want to ask one very pertinent question. I want to know what is your view on this. There's something called free trade, which, based on World Trade Organization protocols and stuff, which we have to take a hands-off approach on. So, the government cannot impose a ban on foreign food. There may not be foreign exchange available to import it to the quantum you were doing it in the past, but there is still the avenue to import. So, let's take pineapple, for example. Mr. Dr. Francis and his team from Table and Pineapple Farmers produce pine, sweet tasting pine. But Dole also bring down the pine. It looks better, it is better shaped, it's better color, whatever that means. And you do that. But in the event that a Dole pineapple could still sell cheaper than a Table and pineapple, what are our options? In fact, you should be asking me that, but I am asking you that.
I prefer me answering this question to you, sir, as the advocate for farmers and the agriculture development in this country. You know, there's something called the non-tariff barriers, right? And we would not go there into this discussion. But we have a next-door neighbor called Barbados, a country called Barbados. I have been one of the main exporters to Barbados over the years, and you know what they do? They have a foreign exchange control system. And for you to get a license to import anything, you have to have collaboration between the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Agriculture. And you have to show proper justification that this commodity is not being produced of sufficient quantity at that time on the island. Only then you'll be granted a license. And they are operating within the CARICOM trade agreement, the Treaty of Chaguaramas. So I am saying that even within CARICOM, right, we still don't enjoy free trade, right? So we just have to look closely. There are areas, right? There are areas where we could treat with those issues. We talk eat local, we talk buy local, but we have to produce local, you know, and everything else falls in place. But that's for another discussion, which I'll be happy to share all that information with you and more.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Madam President, Minister Khan now identified a number of shortfalls in terms of our production, especially like in the sheep and goat area and a number of other agricultural areas. Would you say that the land tenancy issues in terms of having documentation for farmers to get financing to push mechanization, capitalization of their farms and so on, do you think that is that the land tenure issue and financing is directly related to the low production in terms of our local production that we're seeing on this document?
Of course, food cannot be produced on our rooftops. It has to be produced on land. And land tenancy, regularization, land availability to farmers is the catalyst for the growth of the agriculture sector. And only when we treat with that issue, we could treat with the issue of financing, mechanization. In fact, the Agriculture Society is putting it to this committee together today, that if it is that this committee stands firm in its commitment and the government of the day in treating in an aggressive way the issue of land regularization, we are prepared to work with you day and night on this process. And we are saying that in the next 18 months, we could see a significant reduction in the food import bill. We could become more competitive on the export market because we will be able to reduce our cost of production through the mechanization and introduction of new technology. Nobody wants to invest on a parcel of land which maybe tomorrow somebody could come and say, listen, you have no title to this land, you need to get out and we're going to build some housing or so. And in that context, I want to bring to Mr. Senator Khan, sir, as the Minister of Rural Development, I challenge you today, sir. North Manzilina farming community, that is in MP Smith's adjacent constituency. The Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, ICA, partnered with the farmers in that community and put together a wonderful document. It's a project proposal of the North Manzana farmers for the establishment of an agro-processing facility and a spa to see the development of the coconut industry in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's an area that is very rural, very underdeveloped. Illiteracy among the people is very high, and you all have all sorts of social issues. The society went in there, we started a program, we have about 40 young people already on the land. Let's go in there, let's regularize those farmers, let's bring in the financiers, let's bring in the community development, let's bring the agencies together, and let us say to Trinidad and Tobago, this is a model for developing rural communities, and we are committed to working with you in that regard.
You're pushing against an open door there.
Mr. Chairman, one thing. I don't want to be crucified when I go back to Moruga, so I just need to say to Mr. Karim about this hottest pepper from Maloney. I'm not so sure about that.
Not hottest.
I want to go home safely.
Well,
Okay.
we wouldn't want to take that from Moruga. We really produce a high-flavored hot pepper. Not the hottest. Yeah, we will leave that with Moruga.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
I can go home in peace now.
Yeah.
I thank you all very much. I wish to convey our thanks to the President, Mrs. Suku, and other representatives from the society, but for your contribution here today and sharing your experience with the committee. I would also like to thank fellow members of the committee and the parliamentary staff for their assistance rendered in conduct of these proceedings. And finally, last but not least, I thank the media for their coverage of the event and our viewers on the parliamentary channel and the listeners on the FM station. And on that note, I bring these proceedings to a close and suspend the sitting.